Hi, I'm Genevieve Dewey, and I'm going to be reading a scene for you today from First I Love You, the first book in the Downey Trilogy. What makes this book kind of unique is that each of the chapters is told from the perspective of the six main characters. And this particular chapter that I'm going to be reading from is told from the perspective of DEA agent James Hoffman. The scene is right after he and Kiki Downey, the daughter of mobster Mickey Downey, have met at the Trump Tower in Chicago. She is having a 21st birthday party, and unbeknownst to everybody, has invited Mary Gates, the mother of her half-brother, Detective Tommy Gates, to her party, and her father, who has been in love with Mary his whole life, does not know that this is going to happen. And Mary doesn't know that Mickey's going to be there. Nobody knows anything except it sparks this whole confrontation off. And this scene is the very first beginning of chapter 8 from James' point of view. The trouble with princesses is their utter sense of self-entitlement, James thought. It wasn't his job to keep tabs on mob princesses, but this one was sort of a hobby. Others did Sudoku, he did Kiki watching. Not in a creepy stalker sort of way, just casually, like one followed a soap opera or a reality TV show. He could totally see her making an episode of Mob Wife when she went ahead and followed her destiny to become the wife of a dirtbag criminal. No, he didn't follow her around or even run background checks on her. He didn't have to. Catherine Downey was always in the news since she and her father moved here from New York 5 years before. The society news, that is. She appeared to be fond of benefit parties, charities involving animals, from the sounds of her blog, shopping and more shopping. He never knew if he felt sorry for her or fascinated by such an utter waste of a life. Beautiful, pampered, and useless. When Detective Gates had revealed his connection to Downey, his first thought had been how useful Tommy's father could be in opening some doors for him, and his second thought, much later in his hotel room, was how ironic it was his favorite source of amusement in the papers besides the comics was the sister of his new partner. Funny how life throws curveballs like that. So, just out of curiosity, how did you get her to come? James asked, keeping an eye on Bernardo, who was arguing with his daughter and throwing curious glances in the direction in which Downey and Mary Gates had left. Told her that Daddy would be away on a business trip, and since Mom wouldn't be here to interfere, it'd be nice to have her here for Tommy to not feel so lonely, and she could have a nice vacation. Sort of said it was just us and a few close friends meeting up in the restaurant, Kiki answered tonelessly, still looking beseechingly at her brother. She looked like she was going to cry. James hated it when women cried. He felt like they used it as a weapon more often than not. Even his sisters, both at the bureau and ordinarily tough as nails, did the crying thing when words failed. He looked over at Tommy, hoping he would feel this one, since she was his sister after all. Tommy started to move toward the door, but Kiki grabbed his arm and turned him to look at her. "Sorry," she whispered. James watched in fascination as Tommy smiled a crooked smile and brushed a curl behind her ear. "I know, Kix. You meant well. I'll take care of it," he said gently, kissed her forehead, and then moved off. James didn't think Tommy ought to be comforting the girl for what she had recklessly put in motion, and Tommy would now have to clean up. But he knew what it was like as a brother to think the best in your sibling. "Kix?" James asked. "Tommy's nickname for me. Because he loved shoes so much," she answered with a bite to her tongue and a challenge in her face. "Oh, did the little kitten want to play?" James thought. He stepped right in front of her. "You know, it occurs to me, Catherine, we could be quite useful to each other," he said, smiling his most ingratiating smile and scanning her head to toe. "Hell, if a woman was going to go out of her way to wear so little, a man might as well enjoy the show, right?" James heard a throat clearing and remembered Ginny was still standing next to them. He turned his gaze from Kiki's narrowed eyes to raise a questioning eyebrow at his colleague. She looked somewhere between flabbergasted and offended. On whose behalf? James wondered. "Yes, Agent Summers?" James asked, as polite as he could muster. Still hadn't gotten over her crashing a party on his own home field. True, he was also crashing the party, but again, this was his territory. She was supposed to be back in D.C., not sweet-talking Detective Gates into a date. He had clearly underestimated her ambitiousness. "You were going to show me the restroom, Kiki?" James said pointedly. Kiki was clearly flustered and unsure. She kept twirling a lock of her curly dark brown hair and darting glances around the room. James wanted to press his advantage and didn't appreciate Ginny blocking him, especially since they had made a pretty good tag team just days before. He needed to convince Tom to get Downey on board, or at least use his connection to gather information. And Kiki was another way to accomplish this, maybe even an entirely different route in. But here was Agent Summers trying to nip that in the bud. Was this a gender solidarity thing, or did she think it was a dead end? He shrugged his shoulders and walked around Kiki, deliberately stopping right behind her and leaning down so his head was next to her ear. "It was nice meeting you, Catherine, but I don't want to miss out on the next act of this little family drama you created," he said, smiling with satisfaction when she shivered a bit. Her hair smelled of pina coladas. He was surprised she didn't wear any perfume. His smile slid off a bit as he caught his partner's stony, obviously disapproving FBI face. Okay, so maybe he was crossing some conduct lines here, but it's not like she was some little innocent, James thought as he walked away. And they weren't here on official business anyway. Sighing in frustration at the missed opportunity, he noticed that O'Rourke had made it to the party, but he carried on to the entrance to accidentally, on purpose, run into Tommy and his parents. "Let me at least take you back to your hotel," Downey was saying as James slipped into the hallway. "I can do that," Tommy interjected hastily. Mary Gates let out a tut and rolled her eyes. "I'm staying right here. Kiki reserved the room. I have a spa treatment tomorrow. The whole works. I'm perfectly fine, like I've already told both of you. It was just a shock, that's all. Don't be upset with the girl. I'm sure she means well," she said. "And like I said, you're more than welcome to stay. Don't run off because of me," Downey said. Tommy was frowning at both of them. "I didn't," she said with her chin up. "It's just that big parties aren't my thing. You know that, Michael." Michael? So formal, James thought. "My memory is just as good as it ever was, my girl," Downey replied softly. She flushed. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. Mary turned to Tommy, who was glaring at his father and gripping and ungripping his fists like he didn't know what to do with him. "Tommy, maybe you can walk me to my room." Tommy nodded and placed his hand at his mother's back, then walked to the elevator with her. Downey was wearing that same look of frustrated longing on his face he had in the limo the other day. There was silence as the elevator came. "You just gonna stand there, Jimmy?" Downey finally said without turning and staring at the elevator. "It's James. I don't like nicknames much. Just a quirk," James said, rocking back on his heels, hands in his pockets. "You call my son Thomas, then?" Downey asked, finally turning and walking towards James. "For myself, I mean. Some party you've thrown for your daughter here. Noticed a few of your friends in attendance," James said. And how's it come you're here tonight? Tommy didn't mention inviting 2 feds to the party," Downey said, voice all velvety steel, eyes cold as ice. "Good old Pops has left the building, and Mobster Mickey was in the house," James thought cynically. "The Honorable James Dobson is my mother's middle brother. Maybe he thought it better for his reputation not to attend. Maybe he let me come instead, seeing as I'm a friend of Kiki's brother," James said, certain butter wouldn't melt in his mouth. "Oh, and how is it for your reputation, Agent Hoffman? And let's cut the bullshit. You've known my son a matter of days. I don't care if the 2 of you bonded over donuts and polishing the shiny pieces of tin you call badges. You will not use my family to get to me. You got something to say to me, man up and say it. Understood?" Downey gritted out, every word enunciated with clear meanness. James fed his gaze and didn't blink. He let the silence stretch. "How much do you know about the case we're working on?" James finally asked. "My son doesn't share the details of his work with me, and I don't share the details of mine. That would be inappropriate. Don't you think?" Downey replied, eyebrow arched. James nodded, rocking on his heels again. "Thing is," James trailed off, narrowing his eyes but maintaining eye contact. "The thing is, aren't you retired?" "And?" Downey asked, clearly irritated at James' prying. James sighed. He knew he wasn't going to gain traction with Downey tonight. He shrugged, then assumed his more relaxed stance. That one that usually put people at ease, even the criminal type. "For the record, I do consider Tommy a friend, regardless of how long we've known each other," James said sincerely. Downey said nothing, clearly unmoved by James' body language or tone. After a moment, Downey walked back down the hall and into the party, without looking back. James thought about the persons of interest in the other room and tried to decide if it was worth returning to the party as well. It may be better to let Jimmy win this round, he thought. "What did you mean by we could be useful to each other?" James heard a soft voice ask from the shadows. He looked for the source and saw Kiki Downey standing by a large window. How long had she been there? How had she given Jimmy the slip? How come neither he nor Downey had seen her a moment ago? It disconcerted him that she managed to slide in under his radar. He sauntered over to her and stood closer to her than propriety deemed normal. She didn't back up, simply tilted her head up to look into his face. He could feel the cold of the glass window juxtaposed with the heat from her body. "You don't have much respect for me, do you?" Kiki asked. "On the contrary. If I ever need to know which shoes to wear to match my tie, you'd be the first person I call." "If I had your number," James said, trying to temper the sarcasm with a charming smile. "I'm sure you already have it, along with all the other boring background check facts you recited earlier," she rejoined, making no move to retreat. James admired her nerve. Maybe this princess had a bit of her father's stealing her after all. "Well, that would defeat the purpose of you giving it to me," he said. "What purpose would that be? And you still haven't answered my question," she retorted. "How about you answer one of mine first?" James asked, then chuckled as she raised an eyebrow in a pretty good impression of her father. "Why would you invite your father's old mistress to your party when she is not related to you, was no doubt the source of great pain and embarrassment for your own mother, and her presence you had to know would be unwelcome with at least a few of your guests? I already explained my reasons to my brother, and his opinion is the only one I care about. Certainly not a rude, presumptuous, party-crushing bore like yourself. You don't know a damn thing about me," she answered, dark eyes glittering with anger. "What I know is there's a lot of big, important, grown-up things going on, and the last thing Tommy needs is his spoiled little sister playing games with his family and distracting him from this case," he said, with perhaps a bit more heat than he meant, but the smell of her hair and the glittering of her lip gloss in the hall lights was distracting him, and he was trying to keep his mind on the task at hand. "How dare you? You're the outsider here. It's you who should butt the hell out of my family's private issues. And you've the nerve to say we can be of use to each other? Why the fuck should I help you with anything?" Kiki ground out. "Tisk, tisk, such language, little girl," James said with a smirk. By God, she was beautiful, he couldn't help but think. "How about we go back to your place and discuss this like rational adults?" he finished in a playful yet suggestive tone. She let out a huff, clearly nonplussed by his forwardness. Then something flashed in her eyes, a sort of calculating, cynical, and predatory look that had him feeling momentarily nonplussed himself. "All right, let me say goodbye to my guests. You obviously already know where I live. I'll meet you there in a half hour," Kiki said, cool and collected once more. It was more like an hour when she arrived at her door, but who was counting? They said nothing to each other as she led him inside. James looked around her one-bedroom apartment and thought it was nothing like he expected. He'd expected lots of pink or maybe something trendy with splashy colors. It was all cool metals, finished wood, and retro 50s-style furniture. Frank Lloyd Wright stills peppered the room, and books lined the entirety of one wall. Her windows were left uncovered, and the city lights cast interesting reflections in the room. She threw her shawl and little clutch purse on the butterfly chair by the bookshelf. Then she walked up to him and grabbed his holster. He stopped her hand. "What are you doing?" James asked, his discomfort at having underestimated her twice in one evening making him irrationally angry. "You should make yourself more comfortable," Kiki said seductively. "How about we came here to talk?" he prevaricated, as he took his jacket, gun, and badge off. He could tell she was playing some sort of game, and it spiked his irritation up a notch. His mood was all over the place, actually. There was frustration at the blocked opportunities by his partners in Downey to further the case tonight, mixed with his desire for her, the self-disgust that brought, the irritation to childish interference, the discomfort of knowing she was right, and it wasn't his business what went on between her and her family. But now she had decided to take his sexual sparring and call his bluff, except it wasn't bluffing. Did she really think he would be scared off from her family this way? Maybe that would work with her usual limp-wristed boy toys or the Goombas, who were probably too afraid of her daddy to actually make a move, but not with him. James hooked an arm behind her back and yanked her towards him. She gasped and put her free hand on his chest, but she didn't push him away. She kept looking at him, eyes still full of challenge and no fear. It was like something snapped in his brain, and all he wanted was to wipe that look from her eyes, to make her realize lives weren't to be played with, manipulated, to give her a taste of her own medicine.